And welcome to another episode of Patriots 4th and 2. I am your host today, Derek Havens. Joining me, as always, is Mr. Steve Balestrieri. We're both PatsFans.com bloggers. Today's episode is a very special one for Steve and I. It's something we have done pretty much every year for the last decade plus. It's our annual first-round mock draft where we alternate picks for all 32 teams, roll right through that round. So we're going to be sharing that with you today. And at the end, we're going to kind of share our final thoughts on the 2024 draft before it begins, which is, right now we're recording Tuesday, April 23rd at 12 o'clock Eastern time. And so we are only, Steve, about what are we like 52 hours ish away, something like that. I don't know. We're less than 60 hours away. Let's do it that way. It's better not to do math live. Less than 60 hours away, Steve, from the NFL draft. One of our favorite times of the year. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. This is the time of year that we always look forward to because right after we do our mock draft every year, then the real thing rolls around and we can see how wrong we were.
Oh, yeah.
This year, it's going to be crazy, I think, that first round, right? The first
it's
round.
So weird. Yeah.
There's going to be so many variables. And by the way, folks, we didn't break up the draft order by making trades because I think there'll be probably several in that first round. But we could have spent a week doing trades.
I don't think we've ever done trades in our mock draft. Now, I will say that 2 years ago, we absolutely, and you can check the archives, I'm not lying on this, we absolutely nailed the Patriots and the Chiefs trade. Unfortunately, it should have been for Trent McDuffie, but then being Cole Strange. But we did nail that spot like nobody's business. And we've hit on a couple players in our mock over the years. It's not a totally pointless exercise. It's more for fun than anything. But we had the N'Keal Harry pick right. Unfortunately,
we both wanted Debo, but we felt like they were going to take N'Keal Harry.
Yeah, we did. We covered our bases there. But, so we'll rifle through that. We have a couple of thoughts. I mean, I'll just tell you right off the rip, Steve, I'm super excited for this week. I mean, I'm ready for it to be here. I hate when it's going to be over, but I'm looking forward to it. Just start off the top real quick, too, folks. We are, obviously, the draft's on Thursday, the first round. Steve and I, on the following morning, we are going to release a podcast. It'll probably be about a 20-ish minute recap of whatever the team did the day before. We'll do a full recap next week, and I'd love to get some kind of a guest on because I was efforting to do it last week. But honestly, just full transparency because that's how we roll here. I had so much family stuff going on last week. I just couldn't keep up with it. So that is on me, and I apologize. But we are going to go ahead and get something going. So
unnecessary. I mean, when you have family members that are sick or whatever, you got to take care of that first.
Yeah, I know, but I do like to put the show first when I can. So, Steve, do you have any? I mean, obviously we can have a talk about some of the stuff at the end, but do you have anything off the top you want to start with, or do you want to just dive into the mock?
Let's just jump right into it.
All right, cool. So we're going to go right into it. So I took the odd picks this year. Steve had the evens. Steve had the evens. So we're going to just rifle through that. First pick overall, Steve, it's the worst kept secret in football right now. Caleb Williams, the quarterback from USC to the Chicago Bears. It just makes all the sense in the world. I mean, it's made sense for a long time, especially after they traded Justin Fields. It's pretty much a fait accompli at this point.
Yeah, if they take anyone else other than Caleb Williams, that'll be an absolute shocker.
Yeah,
at this point, right?
I mean, they're not even like hiding it anymore. Like Caleb Williams is like openly talking about like the Bears and stuff, like on the Pivot podcast for with Ryan Clark and those guys on ESPN and stuff. It is what it is. Who'd you have at 2? You had Washington, Steve. What did you go with?
Yeah, Washington Commanders, Jaden Daniels. And again, there's so much speculation back and forth between Daniels and Drake May. Mm-hmm. I'll stick with Adam Schefter, who's usually really good with this stuff. And he said, this was like 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. He said, Washington fans can buy their Jaden Daniels jerseys. Yeah. So I'm sticking with that.
I
and again,
on a scale
not
from
much,
1 to 10, Steve, I didn't mean to cut you off. On a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the most shocked, how shocked would you be if it wasn't Jaden Daniels? If it was, let's just assume it would be Drake May. I'm assuming it's not going to be like JJ McCarthy or something.
yeah.
But
I mean, I wouldn't be shocked at all because the consensus keeps going back and forth with these two guys.
And the Vegas odds shifted, which I find really weird because Vegas doesn't lose very often. So the fact that the odds shifted with Drake May more in the conversation had my eyes open. It's also probably a story for another day, okay? But I also find it extremely weird that ESPN has a betting book, but they have one of the best insiders in all of sports. So Adam Schefter breaks news that, or whatever, and then all of a sudden the odds switch. I don't know. I just feel like that's really kind of murky. It's kind of an off-season topic we can touch back into another day, but it seems like a little bit of a weird situation in there. But whatever. Yeah. I agree. I think it will be Jaden Daniels too. I think that there's a lot to like about him. I do think you have to tailor your offense to him quite a bit. And I don't think that's a problem, but I'll be interested to see if it's there. I think the Patriots would be interested in Jaden Daniels if they were to take Drake May. In our scenario, I had the third pick for the Patriots. I did take Drake May. I do think that's the direction they're leaning. If they don't take a quarterback, I assume they will trade down. If they were to stick and pick and they don't take a quarterback, I very much believe what you and I have talked about before. It would be Joe Alt. I don't think it would be a receiver. I just have a hard time believing that. But even then, I have a hard time believing that they're going to trade down. I think that they have absolutely put the breadcrumbs out to the media and out to the public and out to the other teams saying we are open to trade down. But I don't think that's something that they're looking to do. I think it's something that they said, we're not going to hang up the phone. We'll listen. But in order for us to move off the spot, it would probably take, as Gerard Mayo says, a bag. So it would take a lot. I don't think the Minnesota package that people have been floating around with the 2 first-round picks this year and 1 next year would be enough. I really don't. Steve and I had an off-air conversation yesterday, as we often do, talking about if they threw in Christian Darrisaw, the left tackle, included in that could be definitely interesting. I just don't see it. At the end of the day, I just don't see it. I think it'll be Drake May at number 3, and I think it would require a little bit of patience from people because it's not going to be an instant gratification. There are no perfect prospects here, like we've talked about for months now. I do think he has all the tools to grow into a franchise quarterback. And Steve, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and we've been talking about this since the end of the season.
Literally,
I think
before the end of the season.
yeah. Well, back in October, I started really digging into the quarterback situations because we saw the handwriting on the wall, right? So I think May is a perfect fit for the Patriots and what they're probably going to run, in terms of an offense. So, I've been on that bandwagon, since the end of the season. So I think it's a great move for the Patriots. And, either way, if it's Daniels or May, I think, they'll tailor the offense differently, obviously, if it's one or the other.
Yep.
But I think either one of those guys is a great pick. So, I'd rather have May, but just by a little bit. And
we'll have to speed this up after this pick. Obviously, we're spending a lot more time on this pick than others, right? Yeah. But I did think that it was interesting listening to Elliot Wolf's comments, Steve, about being in Cleveland, going through that quarterback process. They took Baker. He said they really liked Lamar Jackson, him and the other guys in the front office, but he thought that it would cost them their jobs. I think it was probably more of an ownership thing than anything, and they knew that it was probably a little bit of a big stretch. Now, keep in mind that Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels are different guys, okay? Jaden Daniels is a significantly better passer, at his stage right now coming out of college than Lamar was. Lamar is also really elusive. He's obviously fast, front and back, but he's better side to side than Jaden is. If you ever watch Jaden Daniels highlights, he'll rip the seam. I mean, he will go right up the middle, and he'll watch the Florida game where he put up 600 yards. Okay, he can go 80 yards in a heartbeat. but they are different guys. But but they're still in the same, I guess, category kind of. And so I wonder if Elliott has any revisionist history going off of his comments about Lamar to to someone like Jaden. Would he be interested in that? At the same time, I think there's a lot to like about Drake May. I understand all the concerns against him, but I could do that for literally all 6 quarterbacks. I could talk you in and out of all top 6 guys. I'm not really the biggest Bo Nix fan, but I still think he has some good traits. And I think that no matter who they end up selecting, assuming they take a quarterback in this first round, Steve, I'm sure we're going to have our praise and our criticism about all these guys. There's literally, even Caleb Williams, there's not a perfect quarterback prospect in this group. It's a talented group, and they bring a lot of different flavors, a lot of different varieties, but there's no perfect prospect.
No. And it all comes down to coaching and
system and everything else.
Yeah, and putting them in a position to succeed with good players around them. So
couldn't agree more. Number 4, Steve, Arizona Cardinals. Let's go.
Yeah, no brainer. Marvin Harrison Jr. I think this is probably, unless they trade back, this is probably the other slam dunk pick.
Yeah, I agree. I think they will trade back. I absolutely think that they will. The scuttlebutt around here, because I'm obviously in Scottsdale, the scuttlebutt around here is I think they're going to try to do what they did last year, which was move back and then try to move up a little bit. So I still think they'll try to come away with one of the big 3 receivers. If you talk about MHJ, Neighbors, Rome Odunze, I think they want to come away with one of those guys. But if the Vikings want to trade up, see for them, the Vikings trade makes more sense to me, Steve. I mean, for the Patriots, I said this offline to you, and I said this before in the pod, if the Patriots had their franchise quarterback, I think trading down with like the Vikings to get multiple picks would make all the sense in the world. They have a lot of holes to fill. And so you get more whacks at the apple and, you get more success rate that way. I think that's totally fine. I think the reason you have to turn it down if you're the Patriots is because you want that franchise guy. The Cardinals believe they have that in Kyler Murray. So they can make that move. Monty Austinfort, formerly with the Patriots, did a beautiful job moving down the board last year. I think he's going to try to do something this year where, they move back at 11-23. I'm assuming it's the Vikings in this scenario, obviously. And then I think they try to keep their 23rd pick and then move up from 11, maybe in front of the Bears pick at 9 to go ahead and get one of those top picks. I could see somebody like the Titans or the Falcons potentially moving a couple spots. And we didn't even talk about on air, the whole Falcons, scandal thing, and that could shake up the draft too if we find out in time.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're accused of tampering, and I think it was pretty clear that it happened. The investigation is nearing its end, again, according to Adam Schefter, and a couple of years ago, Miami got docked a first-round pick, and then the following year, I think it was a 6th or a 3rd. It was a first and then a 3rd, but a couple of years before that, Denver got kind of a slap on the wrist. So with the NFL, you kind of never know where they're going, because when it comes to punishments and whatnot, they're all over the board. There's no consistency.
Yeah, I would say trade compensation for players and NFL punishment is always totally up in the air. Sometimes guys get traded and I'm like, that's it. And then sometimes I'm like, whoa, that's a good amount. Same thing with punishments. It could literally, I can't, obviously I know a lot of people who are listening, we all follow the league incredibly well. I've been doing it since I was like 9. Okay. And, and I can't get a handle on it in the slightest. Anyway, we're on to pick number 5, the Los Angeles Chargers. I had them going with Malik Neighbors, the receiver from LSU. I didn't really care for this pick, Steve. I'm not going to lie. I made it because they had Mike Williams go, they had Keenan Allen go. They need some, they need some receivers. I still feel like, I don't know if it would be Joe Alt. I still feel like Harbaugh might take an offensive lineman. I'm still thinking that. Even though their receiver room is depleted, that's just his style. I fully expect them to take one of the first running backs off the board because, again, That's his style. He's used the same formula for all his football programs. He believes in it, and he's kind of old school, and I respect it. But they do need receivers, and Neighbors is explosive. Him and Justin Herbert would be an awesome duo.
Right. And I'll just quickly move on. Number 6, with the Giants. Again, I thought about taking a quarterback here because they're rumored to be, wanting to move up. But I don't know. I just kind of had the feeling that, they wanted one of the top guys, maybe one of the top 3 guys. And if he's not there, then they'll stand with their pick and try to put some better weapons around their offense. So I stuck with offense, and with the Giants at number 6, and this is probably wrong, but I went with Rome Aduzier, the wide receiver, and again, he's one of the top guys, in the draft classes for wide receiver. I think it just makes a lot of sense for them if the quarterback that they wanted isn't there.
Yeah, I'd be curious. This would be an interesting spot for J.J. McCarthy, too, just because I know Daniel Jones isn't great. I think he kind of trick or treats you sometimes, where sometimes he has a couple of good games, but more often than not, it's bad. But it would give McCarthy some time to kind of grow behind him. They have him under contract. I just don't know if they want to do that or not. But I'm with you. They need some explosive players. Rome is a really good receiver. There's a lot to like about his game. The thing I like about him the most, Steve, is he's just so calm. Everything is just easy. It's just like pitch and catch, and he just makes things so steady. For Michael Penix and everything. They had a lot of good skill position players at Washington, and he just kind of showed up and took care of business. By all accounts, seems like a good kid. I think it's a good pick for the Giants. So for I had number 7. I went with Joe Alt to the Tennessee Titans, the tackle out of Notre Dame. I don't know if Will Levis is the guy, but I think he's going to get at least another year to kind of see what he can do. He had a lot of good flashes last year, and he had a lot of ups and downs. But they have DeAndre Hopkins, they have Calvin Ridley. Okay, they have a decent little running game. There's some holes on that team, 100%. There's a lot of issues. There's a reason they're picking in the top 10, obviously. But I think that Joe Alt would be. I don't know if he's ever going to be like an all-pro, but I think he's a stud. I think he's going to come in and be a very good player for 10 years. I just don't. I think Joe Alt, Steve, is probably one of the least riskiest players in this class.
Mm-hmm. Him and Marvin Harrison, I agree. Yeah,
I don't know what their ceiling will be. Like, I don't know what they'll end up being, but they're going to be good players for a long time.
Yeah. Number 8, if they still keep their number 8 pick with Atlanta.
This one was a shocker, Steve.
I'm not sure. I mean, you never know. They might put their punishment off until next year. But yeah. I'm just going with the impression that they're still picking at number 8, the Atlanta. And that's where J.J. McCarthy goes, the quarterback.
Yeah, this one surprised me, Steve. I thought that was an interesting pick. I mean, they did just sign Kirk Cousins, but he is a little long of the tooth. Not that bad. I mean, he's still in NFL terms. I always laugh when I talk about guys like they're like 29 and they're,
Well, he's 35, so.
No, he is 35. He'll probably give you a good 3 years. JJ is very young. He's one of the youngest quarterbacks in the class. You do have time to sit and wait with him.
And with Cousins coming off that injury, and
gives you a little
injury, we don't know what his mobility will be like. So I think this is a good pick for them, because if Cousins gives you 1 or 2 really good years, then it's good for McCarthy to sit and learn. And if Cousins starts to show his age and that injury takes a toll, then you have him to fall back
on. I think it's a very interesting pick. I don't think it's a pick that I don't think is like super popular. You don't see this a lot. But but I thought it was very interesting. For number 9, the Chicago Bears, Steve, in this situation, they're pissed at the way this board fell because they want one of those top 3 receivers to give to Caleb Williams. In this scenario, they're all gone. I went with Dallas Turner, the edge player from Alabama here. They need some help. They did trade for Montez Sweat, which did work out well for them, but they could use some more edge rushers. I was torn on didn't know if I wanted to go offensive line, defensive line, ended up going with defense here, and hopefully they can circle back and try to get a receiver for Caleb in the second round in this scenario.
Yeah, and again, I think that's a good pick for them. I mean, he's a really good player. He's the first defensive guy off the board here. And, it makes sense for the Bears. I know everyone assumes they're going to take a wide receiver, but, that I think he's too good of a player to pass up at this point. And it makes sense for Chicago. So I think
another one in a very long line of Alabama edge rushers.
Alabama defensive players just, every year, right?
It's crazy.
Yeah. Number 10 with the Jets, right? Olu Fashion tackle. I think, I know they signed a couple of guys, but both of those are on the wrong side of 30, and they're, 34 years old. I think they need to have some youth built in there. I know a lot of people thought they would take a tight end here.
Yeah, it could be Brock Bowers here, absolutely.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have to look at it, with the injury history on the tackle that they did sign from Dallas, right? So I think Fashanu is the safe pick here.
I think it's a great scenario for them because he could work into the mix right away, but he likely will probably sit 1 year and then slide right in. I think that they've done a really good job building that roster, Joe Douglas and them, unfortunately for for us. I really do like how they've built the roster. I think this would make a ton of sense in the world. I do think that they could go quarterback if one falls to them as like a stash and kind of develop behind Aaron Rodgers. I just have a hard time believing they're going to do that, Steve, simply because I feel like they're in win now mode and they know they have Aaron Rodgers for this year and maybe one more after that, but that's going to be pretty much it. So this is going to be kind of like a put up or shut up kind of time for them. So I just don't see them getting a quarterback. I could see them taking someone like a Spencer Rattler or somebody like that, in day 2.
Out of my mouth.
Yeah, like on day 2, that would make a lot of sense for them, just to see if they could get something out of that, throw a dart. I think that would be a good move, but I think in the first round, they're going to need to get an offensive lineman. I think Brock Bowers is absolutely in play here, and that would make a lot of sense too. Either way, I think they're in a good spot, so I like that pick a lot. For me, let's see, pick 11 here as I scroll through. Pick 11, I have the Minnesota Vikings taking Michael Penix Jr., quarterback from Washington. They want to come away with quarterback here. Obviously, we've already had 4 come off the board. It was him and Bo Nix. I don't know if they would do this, but and honestly, every podcast, every article, everything that comes out, Michael Penix, I see going around this spot to early second round. I just don't see a scenario with how you and I and many others are expecting the first 4 guys to go off the board. I have a hard time envisioning Michael Penix making it to the end of the round 1. I think he's going to go somewhere in this round 1. There's just too much of a need, and supply and demand right now. They need the supply, so the demand is high, and I just have a hard time believing between the Vikings, the Raiders, the Broncos. I know the Broncos just traded for Zach Wilson. That doesn't mean a thing to me. I think that one of those teams is probably going to come away with at least one of Penix or Nix, Steve. And I just can't see the other one getting out of the first round. There's just too much need.
Yeah. And your pick played into mine because, I at 12, I had Denver if Penix was still on the board taking him. But because he's gone now, I don't think they'll take Bo Nix at 12. So I'm going best player available, Brock Bowers, tight end from Georgia.
Great player.
Tremendous football player. He's a no-brainer. I think he's going to be really, really good. And then they'll try to pick up a quarterback in round 2.
See, I actually think Bo Nix would be really interesting for Denver because Nix very much reminds me of a point guard. I'm not saying he's Drew Brees, but he has some Drew Brees-esque qualities of just making really smart passes, good distributor, puts the ball in a good placement. And Drew Brees did a lot of those things, played for Sean Payton for a long time. So I could see Payton being intrigued with him. But I agree. I think 12 is really rich for him. Even 11 for Penix with his injury history felt rich to me for the previous pick. But I'm assuming we haven't heard anything negative about the medicals. I hope for his sake he's clean, but I don't know what the medicals are for him, and obviously that's going to be a huge element that like we've talked about before. We can't predict. So. Operating on the fact that it's clean, but I think it's a good pick for the Raiders. I had them going with Terrion Arnold, the cornerback for Alabama. They could use some more corner help. I thought about pass rusher here. I thought about offensive line here, quarterback. I was kind of all over the board here. I went with Terrion Arnold. I think they could use the help here. If Michael Penix was still on the board, I think that would be the pick. But I think they go with some defensive help for the time being.
Yeah, I like Arnold. I think he's going to be a really good corner in the league. And again, Alabama puts a lot of good defensive players.
Yeah, he doesn't strike me as a player.
I think.
Yeah, I was just going to say that he doesn't strike me as a player that I feel is going to be like an elite player, but he just reminds me of I don't want to put him in the same category as Joe Alt, but I just think he's going to be a solid pro for many years. He's just, and he comes from a very pro style defense and some really good coaching under Alabama, obviously. And, it just seems like it makes a good pick, like a good fit for Las Vegas.
Yeah. Number 14, New Orleans Saints, another Alabama player. On the flip side of the ball, J.C. Latham, tackle, I think makes a lot of sense for them. Good football player, and they need some help on the offensive line. I think he's a really good get for them.
I will say this now. I was very close to taking Latham for the Chargers at 5 because, and I don't think as highly of him as that, to be honest. I think he's a good player. This is a fine spot for him. I thought top 5 was rich. Honestly, it was Mel Kiper about 2 months ago that I was listening to him talk, and he was talking about Jim Harbaugh type linemen, big, powerful dudes, and that's Latham. So I was like, yeah. I mean, like Latham is more Harbaugh speed than like an Alt. That's just not that's not his normal type. So if you look at the Michigan offensive line, powerhouse that's been coming out, we know well with Mike Onwenu. Latham would fit that bill. Obviously, he was at Alabama, but I just meant when Harbaugh was running the program, obviously at Michigan. 15, I went with Quinion Mitchell, the cornerback for the Colts, out of Toledo. Really talented player, kind of exploded on the scene. Jordan Reed from ESPN did some really good coverage for them. I felt like he put Mitchell on the map early on in this process. It's not like all of us watch a lot of Toledo football. Mitchell's a really interesting player. I think he could be an absolute star. I think if Brock Bowers was here, Steve, I think for the Colts, I think this would make sense for them and their young quarterback, but they could get the defensive help here with the way the board's fallen to this point.
Yeah, and the way Mitchell, I mean, he played at Toledo, which is a great big football school, but then, he went down to the Senior Bowl. And the way he played down there against guys who are top competition in college football, he excelled. So you have to like that pick. I think, he was a guy that just helped himself so much down there. And I think that's a great pick for them.
Absolutely.
And now we're at the halfway point. Seattle Seahawks. I was kind of thinking one way or the other. And then I said, they need help on the offensive line. Troy Fontenot, tackle out of Washington. He doesn't have to move very far.
No, he doesn't, and he's someone who could legitimately play all 5 spots. People weren't sure if he was going to go be a tackle or if he was going to be a guard. A lot of people thought guard. Then he showed up at the combine. His arms, I don't have the measurements in front of me, but his arm length is very important for tackles, and it's why someone like Jordan Morgan, who I see projected a lot as a tackle, kind of early second round out of University of Arizona, I think he's going to end up being a guard because he doesn't have like the arm length that Fontenot has. Really good football player, Steve. Just someone who I really, really like. One of my favorites. I think he's a safe pick. I think it's a great pick for Seattle, and it kind of helps them solidify that line. Let's step aside here, Steve. Let's take a break halfway through. Real quick, we can step aside for podcast purposes, and then when we come back, we'll do the second half of the draft and give our final thoughts on this year's 2024 NFL draft. We'll be right back. All right, we're back here at Patriots 4th and 2. Steve Balestrieri, Derek Havens here. Just want to thank everyone who's listening live. We always appreciate you guys. Feel free to shoot a question in the comment section if you want us to answer that. We'll do that after we wrap this up. I just want to mention, please subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review. Keeps us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. Steve, we're rolling through our annual first round mock here. We just ripped off 16 picks. We're up at 17 now. I had the 17th pick. If I can just find it here in my Rolodex. The Jacksonville Jaguars. I had Byron Murphy going from the defensive tackle from Texas. I think there's a legitimate chance that he's the first defensive player off the board, Steve. I think he's nasty. I think I was very close to taking him with the Bears. I was very close to taking him with the Raiders instead of some defensive help. I think that Byron Murphy, as long as his weight is kept in check, I think he's kind of a different breed. I think he could be an absolute force on the interior of that defensive line. Jacksonville gets a little help up front, the front seven.
Yeah, good pick right there. In fact, I had him pegged for the next pick with Cincinnati, but you stole him right from underneath my nose. So
sorry about that.
I already had it all typed up because I was like, this guy would be a perfect fit for Cincinnati. And I think he's, like you said, I think he's going to be a force on whatever defense he ends up with. And the only issue with him could be his weight. If he's able to keep that under control, he's going to be a really good football player. So
yeah, I agree.
With number 18 with Cincinnati, I kind of flipped it to the other side because they need help on both sides of the ball and on the line. And I went with Talisa
Fuaga.
Yeah, the tackle out of Oregon.
He's another badass.
Really good tackle that's coming off the board in the first round. And I think he fits Cincinnati perfectly in this spot. And I just think that, it was either defensive line or offensive line. And with Murphy off the board, I thought this was the right way to go.
If the Patriots trade down, he would be in my conversation for a pick where they would probably trade to, because I assume they would trade, like if they did the Vikings trade. The only problem is that he's a right tackle, and you already have a right tackle in Mike Onwenu, but what you could do is make literally the right guard, right tackle combo basically impenetrable with these two guys. Fuaga plays with an edge. I love how he plays. He's real strong. He's a very impressive prospect. I really like him a lot. For the Rams at number 19, I had Latu, the outside linebacker, edge player from UCLA. Aside from the medicals, which I know is a big aside, if he had a clean medical, he would be a top 10 pick for sure. I think he would be. The best defensive player prospect in this class if he had a clean bill of health. Now we don't know. I mean, he was medically. He had to basically medically retire at one point before he came back. Steve, he kind of reminds me of the University of Miami prospect that came out a couple of years ago, who plays for the Dolphins now, Jalen Phillips. And I don't mean as a player. I just mean similar stories. Unfortunately for Phillips, he's been a really good player when he's been healthy, but he's gotten hurt a lot. I have no idea if Latu is going to be able to stay healthy. I'm obviously rooting for him too. He's a very talented player. I still think it speaks volumes to him that he was able to come out of his medical retirement, get back, and then work his way into the first round conversation. It speaks to his work ethic and also how talented he is. It just depends on if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, that's the big question for him. And there's no doubting his ability to play. I mean, you watch the tape on him, and he's very, very impressive. He's a really good football player, but you just have to wonder, if that injury history is going to crop back up in the NFL. But I think at this spot, he's worth the risk. So, moving on, number 20 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I had a couple of ways to go with this. I decided to stick to the offensive line because I think this guy, he's going to go in the first round. And I got the Steelers taking Tyler Guyton, the tackle out of Oklahoma. Huge prospect. I mean, this guy is enormous. And
Absolutely.
And he plays with, I mean, you just have to love his play on tape. I think he'll fit right in with the Steelers. And, I was going to go a couple of different ways, but I think this is the safe pick for them.
Yeah, no, I think I think that he's a really impressive guy. He's I wouldn't say he's a perfectly ready to go prospect, but someone with maybe the biggest upside in the entire class, and it's a very deep class, which says a lot. I mean, he's a very big project, and I mean big in terms of his size. And we had two big boys going back to back here in this spot because I went with for 21 with the Dolphins. I went with Amarius Mims, the tackle from Georgia, who's also a house. He's like 6'8", like 340. So he's a very big guy. I think with the Dolphins, protecting Tua needs to be the biggest thing for them. Mims is an interesting prospect because, again, very high on the ceiling. He doesn't have a whole lot of tape. I mean, he's only played in the 20s in terms of games, I believe. And so with Mims, I just think that if you can get him in that offense, obviously Mike McDaniel and Tua, they get the ball out quick. They like to do a lot of spacing, a lot of get guys in space and let their speed take over. But Mims is athletic enough to grow in that system, help protect Tua. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Right. And once again, you pulled another player right out from under my nose. I had him definitely pegged for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yep.
Because I thought he would have fit the Eagles offense perfectly. But so I went the other way and got the Eagles some cornerback help. Nate Wiggins, cornerback out of Clemson. Again, I think he's a really good football player. I think he'll fit with the Philadelphia defense. And again, it was one or the other, but I thought Mims would have been the guy. But I think Wiggins is a really good pick for them as well at this spot.
I agree. The Vikings at 23, I had them take Cooper DeJean, the cornerback, defensive back out of Iowa. I'm not sure where he's going to find a home. I think it's pretty evident just watching him play, though. He can play outside. He can play inside. He can play in the box. He can play deep. He can play all over the defensive back range. I just think he's a good player. He's also a very good punt returner. I just think he's a good football player. Reminds me a little bit of Harrison Smith when he was coming out of Notre Dame about 10 years ago. I just think it makes a lot of sense. Now Cooper ends up playing with Harrison Smith in Minnesota at number 23 overall.
Yeah, I like DeJean out of Iowa. And looking at the draft, I was wondering if he would last to go down to the Baltimore Ravens because they have an affinity for guys from Iowa. And I think he would have fit perfectly in there, but I didn't expect him to last that long.
Yeah.
So, that's a really good pick for
the
Minnesota.
thing about him, though, too, quickly is that sometimes you get worried about guys that play all over the field because you need them to have some kind of a home, right? I'll be curious to see which team drafts him. Some team will draft him in the first round. He's a good football player, but like I'll be curious to see which team drafts him and what their plans for him are. I'll be curious to see how they introduce him. I think Bill Belichick, if he was still with the Patriots and they had a chance to get him, I think that would be the kind of player that he would love. Just kind of your do it all kind of guy.
Yep, I agree. Number 24, the Dallas Cowboys. Jackson Powers Johnson, offensive lineman out of Oregon. I think he would fill a role that they need right now. And, I know Jerry likes to make a splash, with everything he does, but I think this is a really good pick for them. They need offensive line help. They need to protect Dak Prescott, who's in the last year of his contract, by the way.
Yeah, no, they have usually they like taking offensive linemen in that first round. Makes a lot of sense for them. I went with a pretty similar prospect, actually. Graham Barton, the offensive lineman from Duke, another player similar to Powers Johnson, can play at multiple different spots, really versatile, powerful guy. The Packers always value versatility up front. They've had some good hits with their offensive linemen, but they seemingly have lost a couple of guys just from injury or to, like David Bakhtiari left, and they're going to need to go ahead and figure out some more help for Jordan Love. They had a really successful season last year, by all accounts, the youngest team by median age in NFL history to win a playoff game. So they're in a position right now where they don't have a ton of holes. I think they could probably add. I think they could probably add on the offensive line. I think cornerback and safety, I think, are also needs. But with Cooper DeJean gone here, offensive line makes sense, and maybe they can target someone like Tyler Nubin from Minnesota or something in the second round as a safety. But I think Graham Barton's a good football player and can play all over the place.
Yeah, that's a good pick too. At 26, Tampa Bay. I was going to go edge here, and I ended up going edge, but I was kind of torn between two guys, and I'm kind of thinking, because Jared Verse was sitting there.
Yep.
I'm going to go with Darius Robinson, the edge player out of Missouri. I just have a feeling he's going to jump ahead of Verse here. I could be completely wrong on this one. But
it only takes one team, and people are going to be intrigued with Darius Robinson's size, in the way he can move.
Yeah. So I went with him for the Bucs.
And then for 27, I went with Jared Verse, player from Florida State. I'm a little surprised he fell this long. Just couldn't find him a home to this point. Now, who knows? For all we know, Jared Verse is going to be the first player off the board. And he's going to go in the top 10 instead of Dallas, Turner or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, though, Steve, and it happens every year in our mocks, in the real draft and all mocks, someone's got to fall. Not everyone can be, so someone's going to fall. I just think the run on receiver and tackle and quarterback, and really, I shouldn't just say just tackle, just offensive linemen in general, the way offensive linemen went in our draft, guys were going to fall down. We know it's a top-heavy, offensive prospect draft, so it doesn't surprise me that somebody like that fell here. But I think the Cardinals got a good pick at 27 in Jared Verse. Really an explosive player. If he can put it all together, he could be really good.
Yeah, now we move on to the Buffalo Bills.
Yep.
At 28, I had them pegged all along for Chris Jenkins, the defensive lineman out of Michigan.
Yep.
But now after, losing some of their receivers and whatnot, I think Lad McConkey, the wide receiver out of Georgia.
Yep.
I think he'll fit really well there. And it'll give Josh Allen that kind of guy that can get open across the middle and do the dirty work for him, and he can make people miss.
I agree. He's a fantastic player. I think Lad McConkey could be. He's really interesting just in terms of his. Oh, hang on. Sorry. I promise this is worth it. Hang on. Received calls. All right, so Ian Rappaport just a second ago said, while the Commanders and Patriots have received calls from teams attempting to move up for quarterback, Washington has shown no indication it would move. Per me and Mike Garofolo, New England would move for the right offer, but the Pats have not gotten such offer yet. So, just I know it's a little bit of not really breaking news, but it caught my eye. So I wanted to mention that the NFL said they're also not going to discipline the Falcons or the Eagles this week. So it's not going to happen before the draft.
So it'll be next year's draft if they get docked.
Yeah. So that's pertinent to this conversation, but anyway, didn't mean to break it up like that, but I agree. McConkey's a really interesting player. I love his ability to separate. I still think there's another player on the board, which is going to come off soon here, Brian Thomas. I think Adonai Mitchell, I think Xavier Worthy, the Texas guys. I think that could be in the conversation for the Bills too. I didn't hate the Chris Jenkins pick, but I do think they go receiver as they sit right now. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. For the Lions at number 29, I took Chop Robinson, the edge player from Penn State. Another player with a ton of upside. Still really needs to kind of put it all together. But the Lions are kind of in a luxury spot right now. Their roster's pretty strong. There's a lot of different directions they could go. I think they're in the BPA position here, best player available. And I think that, they'll probably look for some help on defense. I think plating across from Aiden Hutchinson would be huge for Chop Robinson. I think
their coach is going to love this guy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he fits that kind of mentality, doesn't he?
To a T. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's a no-brainer right there at 29. I really do. I think, the Lions fans will fall in love with this guy, and I think that their coach will be drooling over this pick. So I think that's a good one. At 30 with Baltimore, again, I was looking at DeJean for here, but I didn't think he would last. So another Alabama quarterback with the coolest name, right? Kool-Aid McKinstry. Again, another great Alabama football player. I think he'll fit right in with the way the Ravens like to play. And, I think he's a really good pick at number 30 for them.
Absolutely. I think it's a good player too. 31, I had the 49ers taking Brian Thomas Jr., the receiver from LSU. Fantastic prospect, explosive like his teammate Neighbors, blazing speed. I personally do not believe he makes it this far. I think if he does start to fall that far, the Patriots should be calling a team like the Lions to move up from 34 to 29 to add someone like this. I think he'll go a little earlier in this mock. And like I said, somebody's going to fall. I had him falling in this scenario. I do believe that the 49ers, they're not going to be able to pay everybody. So what I think they'll end up doing is trading Ayuk or Debo. If not this offseason, one of them I don't think will be there next year. If they pay Ayuk, it'll be Debo who's gone next year, in my opinion. If they don't pay Ayuk and they play him out, then he'll walk, and then they can replace him with somebody like this. They're not the same type of player, but you're adding a very good receiver to an already skilled offensive group. I think it makes a lot of sense for them.
Yeah, I think I was surprised as you that he lasted this long, but not everyone can be a top 10 pick. So it's just one of those things, and. When you pick this player, Thomas, I was wondering if, same thing, that one of the guys, they may feel like they have to get rid of him, not because they want to, just for money. They can't pay them all. But, I think he would thrive in San Francisco.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's wrap it up, Steve.
Yeah. Number 32, Kansas City Chiefs, Xavier Worthy.
Oh, I hated when you made this pick.
Wide receiver out of Texas.
Because I like Worthy, and he's an explosive player. The Chiefs add more speed.
And, he's going to love playing with Patrick Mahomes. You know,
and Andy Reid's gonna love him having that speed on that field, the fastest 40 time in the NFL history.
Another blazer for the Chiefs, and I think that makes perfect sense for that offense.
Yep.
You know, the one thing they lacked a little bit was that outside guy that would, take the top off of defense. They have him now.
Yeah, I mean, Worthy can really play inside and outside. His teammate Adonai Mitchell is more of your traditional X outside player. Worthy, you can kind of move him all over. He kind of reminds me of Kendrick Bourne. He's just faster. And KB's already pretty fast as it is. But yeah, no, really interesting. And there's several players, Steve. There's several players here that I feel like that should have made it into this. That should have made it, into this first round, but didn't. And that's just where this draft is. I think that this is a really, really talented class. Obviously, we've talked about that. And I do think the Patriots, and one of the things that I feel like personally with the Patriots, which I don't think people are talking about enough, but I don't blame them for the discourse because they have the third overall pick. But one of the things that I've mentioned on this show before is I think that 34th pick is very exciting because in this scenario, we could probably rip off 10 to 20 players who are going to be good players who are going to go in that top of that second round. And if you're at 34, I think one of the exciting things for the Patriots is I think that pretty much anytime after I'd say pick 20, Steve, I think that you got to be on high alert as a Patriots fan to see if they're going to trade back up because that fifth-year option is huge for teams, and that's valuable. So I would be interested to see if they move up from 34 to that high 20 so they can secure the guy that they want, and they can go ahead and get that fifth-year option for a player. I think that'll be kind of a sneaky fun element of the first round.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you look at it, I mean, like you said, the fifth-year option's there. But even if they aren't able to move back up, at 34, there's still going to be some really good players because not all of these guys can fit, in the first round. And there's still some really good guys out there. And I know people are going back and forth in regards to, is it going to be a, wide receiver or a tackle? I think you just have to watch the board and see how it plays out.
I thought that if anyone's interested, JJ McCarthy had some really interesting comments on. I don't know if you saw this, Steve. He was JJ McCarthy, the quarterback from Michigan. Was on the Adam Schefter podcast. Had some really interesting comments about Tom Brady, obviously another Michigan alum. He said that him and Tom have a great relationship. He tries not to bother him, but he likes to kind of pick his brain. Obviously, I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit here. Also talked about the Kraft family and how he met Robert Kraft on his visit there, and he thought he was the smoothest, coolest guy he's met in a long time. He had some very high things to say. Some very very good things to say about the Kraft family and about Brady and about the Patriots. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know, Steve. I mean, look, our final thoughts here on we don't have to rush throughout this fight, but our final thoughts on the draft is, I guess for me, Steve, I'm really happy that it's Tuesday at about 1 p.m. Eastern. I'm ready to get to Thursday badly. At some point, you can only circumcise the mosquito so many times, and I feel like we have gone through, and everybody's listened to us and all the other great podcasts out there. Like, we've talked about so many different scenarios. I'm really just excited to see where the Mayo and Wolf era, how they kind of take off. And obviously we can't judge them right off the bat, but there's so much we don't know about what they want. Everyone talks about a Patriots type of guy. We don't know what a Patriots type of player is right now. This is not the Bill Belichick Patriots. We don't know if Elliott Wolf's going to be closer to what his dad Ron believed, or if he's going to be a little bit more modern. He's been in Green Bay, he's been in Cleveland, now he's with the Patriots. He's been under Bill Belichick. His dad's been one of the greatest GMs of NFL history. He worked with a lot of great people over in Cleveland. I don't know what his flavor is going to be. I also don't know what his flavor, and the other thing that's going on too, Steve, is, there's an article I know co-host Russ Goldman shared it with yesterday about Jonathan Kraft being heavily involved. But by all reports, if you believe them, are that he'll be heavily involved, but he will not be the one making the final decision. That it will be Wolf. So, but I thought, as Wolf said in his comments last week, I thought it was interesting where he said, if I want somebody and everybody else in the room doesn't, I'm not crazy. I thought that was kind of maybe a shot at Bill, maybe not, but he's like, I'm not crazy. I will, we'll make a room collectively, but ultimately he will have the final say. I'm just fascinated to see how this process plays out, Steve, and I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, and again, I mean, at first glance, that report about Jonathan Kraft, I mean, that makes you step back and, like a Bose commercial where your hair goes back and stands on end. But, it could be just that, hey, the ownership has every right to want to be kept involved. And, if teams are coming with, trade packages, I think you have to keep the ownership involved. But let's hope that ownership isn't making the call here.
Yeah, and I think it'll be really interesting to see how. I agree with that 100%. By the way, I think it'll be really interesting to see how the top of the quarterback thing plays out. We've never seen 4 quarterbacks go in a row. I don't think we've ever seen 3 quarterbacks go in a row. I do think you'll see the 3 quarterbacks go in a row this year. Even if the Patriots aren't the one who was the 3rd quarterback, if they were to trade out, I still think that a team that would trade up would be trading up for a quarterback. So I think either way, you're going to see 3 quarterbacks, potentially 4, go in a row, which would be pretty crazy. I saw a report that the Commanders received some calls. Obviously, I just read it, a couple minutes ago, and the Raiders were in the mix for that. That's not surprising to me because there's no secret the Raiders really want Jaden Daniels. Antonio Pierce and Jaden Daniels are very tight. They were going back to their time at Arizona State together, so I thought that's kind of interesting. There was the report about Jaden Daniels not being super thrilled with his visit to Washington because they brought all these other prospects, which you and I talked offline about yesterday. I thought that was kind of interesting too, but honestly, it's so hard right now, Steve, to decipher what's real and what's not real. It's like Inception at this time of year. You just don't know if what you're hearing is real or BS. And I keep hearing little things and about the Patriots, and I heard someone say, well, it's just a smoke screen. It's a smoke screen. And I keep wondering, who are they smoke screening? They have the 3rd pick in the draft. They can do whatever the hell they want. I mean, maybe it is, but it's all a house of cards right now, but it's so hard to decipher what's real and what's not. I almost feel like everything you hear, like the 10 days leading up to the draft, is all BS. Okay. All BS at this time of year. I almost feel like you're hearing so much misinformation that you really have to remember to what you were hearing about a week or 2 ago. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, we've been hearing nothing but Daniels, May for a very long time here now, with some people throwing McCarthy in the mix. And then all of a sudden, on yesterday, all these reports are coming out that, it's going to be Penix, and I just don't see them taking him at number 3. And if you really want him, you're going to have to take him at 3, because you can't risk moving back and hoping he's going to be there at a later spot. So, I just don't see that playing out that way, and I think it would be foolhardy for the Patriots to trade back with the hopes that they're going to get him where they trade back to, because then, you're playing with fire there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Let me ask you a random question, Steve. I'm going to put you on the spot, and I will have an answer if you need to think about it for a second, because you hate when I do this to you, and I don't blame you.
I love it when you do this.
Give me a prospect, not in the 1st round. Give me a prospect that you really hope the Patriots come away with in this draft.
Oh, but not a 1st rounder.
Not a 1st rounder.
Well,
I mean, I guess it can be a first rounder, but let's just for the sake of conversation do non-quarterback. Everyone listening knows that we both want Drake May. I think
right.
we'd be happy with Jaden Daniels too, and stuff. But I think we both want Drake May. So give me a non-quarterback. I was thinking probably a day 2 or day 3 prospect, but whatever you can think of off the top. This is off the cuff, so I get it.
Well, my first instinct was Xavier Leggett, but
I knew you were going to say that.
But I'm going to go somewhere different with this.
Okay.
I think I'm going to go the tackle from Houston, Paul.
Oh, okay.
I really like him.
Patrick Paul?
Do.
Or is it Peter Paul? No, Patrick Paul. Yeah, out of Houston.
Paul.
Yeah, he's interesting. I'm curious to see where he goes. Such a big guy, really good feet. I could see him going in the 3rd round. I don't think he's going to last that long because I think of how strong the run is. I think he's going to go in day 2. I think if the Patriots are going to want him, they're going to have to take him. They're going to have to take him, at 34 or shortly thereafterwards, if they move back or whatever. I'm going to go with. Man, I like a lot of Michigan guys. I like Roman Wilson, the receiver out of Michigan. I do. I like Xavier Leggett. I like Ricky Pearsall, the Florida receiver, is another badass. Like, I know the Patriots have a lot of good inside receivers and they need more X-style receivers, but there's a lot of guys in that class that I like. I like the way Roman Wilson moves. He reminds me of Amon-Ra St. Brown. And if you go back to that class, I wasn't a big St. Brown fan when he came out of USC, and I don't know if I'm having like revisionist history because of it, but Roman Wilson I just like the way he moves. I really like a lot of the guys coming out of Michigan, all over the board. They have good offensive linemen, good secondary players, good receivers, probably, if not the best running back, a top 2 running back in this class. Harbaugh just had that program humming, and there's a lot of good players that I think there's something to be said about players that came from a head coach with NFL experience to get them prepped for the NFL. Roman Wilson, I think, is my guy for what I'm kind of thinking, Steve. I just like the way he plays. Him and Ricky Pearsall, the 2 of them, I just love both of them.
Yeah, I wouldn't be against either one of those guys.
Yep.
I think there's so many good players, in the first couple of rounds that they should come away with some difference makers. Right.
I agree. Any final thoughts, Steve, that you have that we haven't shared yet?
I just wish that, the draft process was a little shorter. I mean, it seems like it's 2 weeks too long,
Yeah.
It does. I just feel that way. It's like they take too long with this. And, for the last 2 weeks, all we've been dealing with is disinformation.
I agree. I definitely agree. I do think there's something to be said, which we've talked about before. I think there's something to be said about the fact that we also have some draft fatigue, just considering how bad the team was last year. I think the most important thing that comes out of this draft, Steve, is that the Patriots land a quarterback. Obviously, sounds stupid to say, but it's the truth. The most important thing coming out of this draft is that they come away with their franchise quarterback. They tried with Cam, to salvage it when Brady left. They whiffed on Mac. Whether he didn't pan out or the team didn't support him enough, I think both can be true. I hope that they reset there because I don't think anyone listening to the show or you and I are expecting huge things to happen, going into, next year, as far as, winning goes. But if you can come away with your franchise quarterback and you see development there, then you can fill in the other holes as you go. So I think that's the most important thing that comes out of this weekend.
Absolutely. I mean, you just need to hit on your draft picks and get some difference makers on the field. Yep. And if they're able to do that, then their rebuild time will shorten. I mean, not saying they're going to compete for a Super Bowl if they, hit a home run in the draft. It's still going to take a while, but but it will shorten that rebuild time because if you hit on the quarterback and he ends up playing some next year and he does well, that will entice other free agent receivers to maybe want to come to New England.
I mean, keep in mind too. I mean, we talked about this last night. Let's say the Patriots get Jaden Daniels. Well, Brandon Ayuk and him are really good friends. And Brandon Ayuk, by all accounts, is available right now by trade. So you get that. I mean, I do think there's a lot to like about Jaden Daniels. I have some concerns, but we talked about that at the beginning of the show. I could do that without every single prospect in this quarterback class, really every prospect in this draft, pretty much. But it's like, guys love playing for Jaden Daniels. They raved about him at Arizona State. They raved about him at LSU. And if the Patriots end up getting a guy like that, well, when you have that guy that guys want to play for, they want to rally around, it's easier for you to retain your own players and to sign, other good players around the league when they become available. I mean, look at C.J. Stroud, right, for the Texans. He's a guy that people are enamored with. Players want to play with him. And so now you've got someone like Stephon Diggs who wants to go play for the Texans, because they wanted to change scenery or whatever. And I, put aside your thoughts on Stephon Diggs as it is, but I just meant like he wouldn't have never wanted to play for the Houston Texans 3 years ago. That wasn't a thing. So getting that guy under center, having the guy that people want to play for and believe in and can kind of be that culture builder is the most important thing that can come out of this weekend.
Absolutely. And, say what you will about Diggs being difficult, because his shelf life is 2 to 3 years wherever he goes. Mm-hmm. He's still an enormous talent.
Oh, absolutely.
And putting him with Stroud down in Houston, it may not last more than 2 or 3 years, but it'll be fun to watch while he's there.
Hey, Todd, you said you're pissed if you take May. Just your 2 cents. That's okay. Send me another comment real quick and let me know who you want. I'm curious. And I'm not calling you out. I'm honestly just curious. I want to know who you like. So, it's funny because I feel like people with Drake May, it's either a love him or hate him kind of situation. I mean, there's definitely concerns with him, but like I said, I have concerns about all the guys, in one way or another. So, but regardless, Steve, well, I guess we should wrap up the show. Again, looking forward to doing it. We mentioned this at the top of the show, but just in case people are joining late. So the plan is, obviously, the first round's Thursday night. Oh, Todd wants Marvin Harrison Jr. Okay. All right. It's not going to happen, Todd, but I do think he's a good player. If it is, tell you what, if it happens, I'll be happy for you. I wouldn't be mad either, but I still think you got to go somewhere else with that. But either way, the plan is Thursday night, obviously the first round. So Steve and I will record a recap of Thursday night. Friday morning, we'll post that. Same thing we'll do Saturday from Friday night from day 2 and day 3, and the same thing Sunday from rounds 4 through 7. I'm looking forward to it. I know Steve and I are both ready to I'm just ready, Steve, to stop talking about projections and start talking about, we can just start breaking down the guys they actually like. We deep dove in all these guys, and now I'm ready to just find out who the hell it is. I'm tired of looking up recipes, and I'm ready to friggin' eat. All right, so
yeah. Yeah, I'm ready to sit down and eat at the table.
Yeah, 100%. Well, for Steve Balestrieri, I'm Derek Havens. I want to thank everyone for listening to Patriots 4th and 2 this week, all through draft season, all through the offseason. Again, please subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to the podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review. Keep us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. And we will talk to you guys on Friday. Can't wait for the draft. Enjoy it. We'll talk soon. Take care.